ultimately, a large portion of it is just going to be dictated by the retention of Avery Johnson, and they held on to him, and can Colin Klein and this coaching staff tap into him to make him take that next step, help him take that next step in his career path. And I think they've surrounded him with enough weapons.
Hello and welcome into another edition of Three Ma. I am John Kurtz, joined by Cole Manbeck. No DY today. We are here with you, though. So is our good, trusty friend Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon, brought to you by Holiday Distillery. Get your Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon. If you don't have it near you, talk to your local liquor store. Ask them about getting some in stock, though you can find it in many a place these days. They also have 360 vodka, so you can be ready for any watch parties that you're having for K-State basketball. You may need a lot of that on hand to handle K-State hoops right now, my friends, but we hope that you make all of your watch parties, get-togethers better, courtesy of our friends at Holiday Distillery. Okay, we're gonna go over the transfer portal class, which is nearing completion here at this point now. The window has closed as of Friday, which is nice. It's kind of like an end to the chaos. The dust has settled a bit now on the coaching staff, on the portal class, and we can scope out what's happened here. But I think we start by taking a look at the last two players that K-State got to sign. Brandon White, Tyler Johnson, an offensive tackle from Auburn, who I think is going to be some tackle depth there, a guy who played 12 games as a redshirt freshman a couple of years ago. Played very sparingly this past year in 2025, but he has been on the field some in the SEC. And then a guy that I think is really intriguing at receiver in Brandon White, a Hawaii receiver. He's 5'9", speedster, originally signed with Kentucky and then went to Hawaii. He had 399 yards on 38 catches, a couple of touchdowns, kind of a big play guy, 6 catches of 24 or more yards for Hawaii this season. And Cole, we know this is somebody that K-State was really excited about. Kept pretty quiet, kept it on the down low as they got him in and got him signed up. So that's another one of these indicators that to me has me keeping an eye on him. If like the staff really wanted to keep it quiet and thought, hey, this is kind of a steal, I'm going to put some trust in that and put some weight on that and think that, hey, this guy could be a real playmaker this year.
Yeah, man, they're really excited about what Brandon White brings to the table. And yes, when you look at the numbers, I mean, he's been in college football now 4 years, 3 at Kentucky and now 1 at Hawaii. The production is pretty minimal, right? I mean, you just mentioned it, 38 receptions, 399 yards at Hawaii. Didn't record a stat in 6 games played in the entirety of his career at Kentucky. But he has a skill set that the right coaches and the right system can unlock and tap into that brings a different dynamic to this offense. Some people on our Discord were asking, like, is this the Jace Brown replacement? No, the answer to this is there was nobody like this on Kansas State's roster last year. Brandon White ran a 4.28 40 meter out of high school. He was clocked at a 10.3 100 meter in high school. He was one of the fastest players in the country coming out of his high school class. He earned All-America honors at the 2022 Adidas Indoor Nationals. He placed in the top 3 with a 6.82 second finish in the 60 meter. He is an absolute burner, but it's not just straight line speed. And I haven't gotten to watch a ton of highlights, but I have seen some, and he's got a lot of quick twitch to him. So it's a burst, quick acceleration, and also the ability to make guys miss. So good field vision when he's in the open field. Now, the oddity of all of this, John, is 4 seasons of college football, I just gave you those speed numbers. Big-time track star, only used on 2 kick returns in the entirety of his career. He has only 2 kick returns under his belt throughout his college football career over 4 years. And only 10.5 yards per catch at Hawaii this last year. 4 carries, 36 yards as well. So the numbers are kind of minimal in that regard. He was 3rd on the team in receptions and 3rd on the team in receiving yards. And the concern you might have was, well, Hawaii threw the ball well this past season. I mean, they threw for nearly 3,800 yards. They completed 65%. They attempted 540 passes, but only 7 yards per pass attempt, 70th in the country. and they were 93rd in yards per completion at 10.9. And if you recall, Timmy Chang is their head coach, and the system that he ran under June Jones at Hawaii, a lot of quick passes, right? Get it out, get the guys in space, short air yards per target. And some of the highlights you see with Brandon White is he's got his guy burnt and the ball is underthrown, and he has to come back, get the ball, or it's just incomplete because it was underthrown. So I just know what I would say is Kansas State's coaching staff was ecstatic to get this guy. They didn't want people to know that they were in on him. What I would say is he's kind of they were after Trey Richardson, right? The Topeka product out of Highland Park. And he was very productive at Vanderbilt this last year, over 800 yards receiving. So he's proven it at the high major level in the SEC and got a big deal from Louisville as a result. I would say this is kind of like a diet Trey Richardson, because Trey Richardson is really a big burner. This meets kind of that need that Colin Klein was looking for as a guy with some speed that can stretch the defense and at worst be kind of a gadget player that you can throw out there. And the defenses have to respect the verticality and the threat downfield by using him. But also, John, jet motion. Colin Klein uses a lot of motion pre-snap, a lot of jet action, jet sweep action in his system at Texas A&M and at what he was at K-State too. You get a guy like this, the defense has to really respect that pre-snap as well as during the play. So a lot of tools that I think the coaching staff's excited about here that they can unlock.
It's a great point. And I think it's a perfect comp on the, diet Trey Richardson thing. This is hey, didn't land option A. You can get what I presume to be a much cheaper version of it here in option B. And this is where I think Trey Scott and company being so organized in what they had put together in terms of just a board and, evaluating their needs at every single position helps. So I'm excited for it. I think it's fair with like any of these portal additions. Well, hey, I mean, you can say all you want about bad quarterback situation or whatever at Hawaii, but it's like 400 yards at Hawaii. Can you really get that excited? We'll see. I'm intrigued. I like going out and getting skills, assets, attributes that you can really work with. So for now, all you really have is just putting trust in the evaluation for the most part of these coaches. We're going to talk about overall transfer portal ratings like later on, which is just such a crapshoot. And if you go look at like last year's and see who was highly rated, who wasn't, I mean, it's just there's no real good way to keep track of it and fit. And like Indiana in the national championship game is perfect an example as any. That was not a place that had the people were pegging as like a top 5 portal class last year, and they've just been killing people. So much of it is going to be dependent on a number of different factors. But I think what Cole's emphasizing, what we're trying to emphasize here is like some of the traits, some of the tools that you can see in these guys that they're trying to accentuate. And it's pretty easy to see what you've got as far as the tools are concerned with White.
Yeah. And, I mentioned the jet sweep action, getting guys in space, using receivers in the run game. John, Mario Craver, a receiver at A&M last year, had 11 carries for 81 yards, and Casey Concepcion had 10 carries for 75 yards this last year. 2024, Terry Busty, another receiver, he carried it 16 times for 102 yards. Receivers were credited with 31 rushes for 158 yards in 2024. So he's going to get the ball in his hands, in space. But also, you remember the college football playoff game, and largely dictated by the pass rush that Miami had when they played A&M. But if you watched A&M throughout the season, a lot of bubble screens that they do, they get the ball out quick. And I would imagine that using those bigger receivers out to block, like Jerron Tibbs, Joshua Manning, some of those bigger bodied guys, and using a guy like Brandon White behind them and getting the ball in space and letting him do his thing, that's probably part of the vision here, as well as just getting him vertical and trying to stretch a defense. But I'll also be really interested. I mentioned the kick return stuff, right? I mean, they didn't really land. We thought Cameron Petaway at one point, the Bowling Green running back transfer, would be a guy that they bring in to be that kick returner because he was first team All MAC as a kick returner this last year. He ends up going to Iowa State. So they didn't really land like that guy that is a definitive, special teams burner type, and that's not something maybe that's necessarily on the roster. So I'll be really curious if Stanton Weber foresees using a guy like Brandon White in the kick return and the punt return game, and if he's comfortable with that as a player, because he's certainly got the skill set that you typically would want in a specialist or in a returner type.
Did you point out that he only had 4 carries last year at Hawaii? So like they weren't really using him a whole lot in the jet sweep.
Yeah. 4 for 36. Again, the only Hawaii football that I really got to watch this year was in the Hawaii Bowl when they played Cal, which if you watch that game, he got the "You Got Mossed" by Randy Moss. I don't know if you saw that, John, but he had a touchdown, a really incredible grab in the corner of the end zone where he jumped over the defender, which was a all first team ACC corner at Cal that he completed the pass over. And it was a really special play. And Randy Moss did the whole "You Got Moss" segment with that play on it and from the Hawaii Bowl. And I was only catching the game, but it was impressive. That's the most that I'd gotten to watch Hawaii play really this year. So I don't know what they were necessarily doing. What I would say is their leading receiver transferred to LSU, and he averaged almost 20 yards a catch. So there's something to be said there. He's going to LSU. He was one of their first portal additions. But their next three receivers and receptions, receiving yards, were at 10.9 yards per catch or less. So we'd have to evaluate, what type of route trees and combinations they were running Brandon White on to really fully assess this and the targets, the throws. I will say this, three drops on 66 targets, only a 7% drop rate. That would have been the lowest among K-State receivers on last year's roster.
Okay, like that. Don't put him at tight end.
Yeah.
Oh, I got an audible laugh out of Cole on that. All right. Okay, thoughts on Tyler Johnson, Auburn offensive tackle. Sounded like he earned a starting job in 2024, but that didn't last. Didn't play a whole lot this past year. Look, Auburn's, they fired their head coach. They've got a new regime in there. Hugh Freeze never got things up and running. This year, the whole operation just wasn't very good from Jackson Arnold at quarterback on down. But, I mean, he's a guy who's played some of the SEC, and you're just trying to bring in a little bit of extra tackle depth here at this point.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you think about George Fitzpatrick's back, now there are question marks. Gus Hawkins missed the back half of the season because he had an injury, and they decided to shut it down, and I believe surgery occurred, and, they wanted to just get him a jump start on that, given the direction of where the season was going. But a ton of promise and ceiling upside with Gus Hawkins, who was a redshirt freshman this last year's Mill Valley product. George Fitzpatrick obviously had the medical incident before the season during training camp that sidelined him for the entirety of the season, but they made the big announcement that he was back and seemed really excited about it. Think they can get him to a place where he can be a productive player again. And everybody remembers Chris Kleinman and the staff were talking about he was the best offensive lineman on the team before the medical incident occurred. So if you can get him back close to where he was, John Pastore, I saw from Cam Mansler, who runs a lot of the advanced data analytics, actually graded out, I think, the second lowest pressure rate allowed in the Big 12 this last year. But he was your starting left tackle. He made it through the entirety of the season. No injuries, played the whole year and played pretty darn well. So you've got three starter caliber offensive tackles on your roster. And what we had heard they wanted all along was just basically a depth piece that can play both left and right tackle, a swing type tackle. And Tyler Johnson, when you're looking at a guy like that in the portal, you're going to be hard pressed. I mean, tackles are expensive. You're going to be hard pressed to find a guy that's going to come in, that you're going to want to pay $1 million to get one of the better offensive tackles in the portal to potentially battle for a starting job. When you consider what K-State's got back, it's just not where you're going to allocate your resources necessarily. So, I say he's probably brought in to be like your number 4 overall offensive tackle. Now, he could be better than that. With better coaching, there's some talent there to work with. Coming out of high school in the 2023 recruiting class, he was committed to Texas Tech. Auburn flipped him. So some high-level programs obviously saw a lot of promise there. And in his redshirt freshman season, during training camp, he made a big jump at the back half of that before the season and was tabbed the starting left tackle as a redshirt freshman for Auburn in the season opener against Alabama A&M. Now, he only had 23 snaps in the opener of that game and had a pass blocking grade of 80.9, run blocking grade of 91.2. He rotated in and out with the other guy he was competing with first couple games of that season. He only got 92 snaps that year. He obviously saw his snap count significantly decrease. So, you just have to hope that the staff here, they see some upside they can work with. He's got the size, 6'6", 320 plus pounds. Obviously, Auburn saw something to where he was on the field as a redshirt freshman starting for them at one point. You can refine that. And also, everyone just needs to keep in mind, now this could go two directions. You could say, wow, he couldn't get on the field for what was a terrible Auburn offensive line this last year. Or two, you could say, Auburn's offensive line might have just been coached incredibly poorly, and Hugh Freeze was a dumpster fire at Auburn. I mean, and 11% sack rate this last season. That ranked 131st out of 130 FBS teams. Near 7% sack rate in 2024. They ran the ball well, 4.4 to 4.7 yards per carry in 2004 and 2025. But the sack rate, pressure rate, some of that just holding on to the ball far too long. I don't know why I'm blanking on the quarterback's name. OU transfer, John.
Jackson Arnold.
Yeah, just poor QB play, poor offensive scheme. So
said that the line was 131st out of 130 FBS teams. So that's pretty damn bad. I got to admit, that's very bad.
If I said 130, I meant 135. But I think they might have been the worst, like the highest sack rate given up. Now, again, Jackson Arnold's at fault for some of that, but I think hopefully Mike Schmidt and the staff, they see something with Tyler Johnson, that he can be a nice depth piece and can contribute. Hopefully at the end of the day, unless he outplays everybody, hopefully you don't need him necessarily to see a ton of snaps on the field. Now, if he comes in, they coach him up. He's got the pedigree that, could be a contributor that can maybe jump somebody. But, now you've got two tackles on each side, guys that can play left, right tackle, that I think you feel pretty good about, what you've done on the exterior of your offensive line on the edges. So,
yeah, it is kind of interesting. I know our plan is to eventually do like some position previews and breakdowns because, there's so many new players. They got 26, I think, right now to the portal. Are you anticipating then that it would be Pastore and Hawkins as your starters, and then you're thinking like hopefully and then you got a couple of lotto tickets, right? Like George Fitzpatrick. Who knows after what he went through this past year, but there's huge upside there, and then maybe there's some upside here too.
Yeah, it's a great question because, George Fitzpatrick was, penned in to be your starting left tackle before this season, before what happened. And Pastore was going to be your right tackle. And then Pastore swung to left, and he did a really nice job there. And so, does Fitzpatrick, is he really actually battling Hawkins? Are they thinking Pastore would stick at left tackle, Fitzpatrick would work at right tackle and fight Hawkins for that job? Or would they swing Fitzpatrick over to left, move Pastore to right? I think they'd keep Pastore at left because he's proven himself over on that side. But yeah, I don't know. Like they needed another guy because of the medical issue with Fitzpatrick and needing an insurance policy there. Now, if he's a full go and he's looking the part like he did before last season, before that all occurred, and Kansas State's in a golden spot at offensive tackle. Like you feel great about what's a very expensive position in the portal, that where you sit, you've got 3 starter capable offensive tackles. I think the ceiling, the upside is incredibly high for Gus Hawkins. And I would think by next year, by the start of the 2026 season, he's ready to be a starter as well. He got a couple starts this year. The talent's there. So it's a matter of what Mike Schmidt sees, what he wants, and really prioritizes here. But I'm excited to see what they do. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of it's going to be dictated by just health.
Before we take a break, I did want to mention you brought up Jerron Tibbs briefly when we were talking about Brandon White. Have we done a show where we've talked about him like officially announcing that he's coming back?
No, we didn't officially talk about that. You had official announcements from him. You had Joe Jackson doing official announcements, but then you also had some guys, John, that just didn't announce anything and they just stayed. I don't think any of us felt great about Logan Bartley at one point, right? Like we thought the relationship with Joe Klanderman was, really, they were really tight, and ultimately he stayed, and that's a huge recruiting win for Colin Klein and staff because we knew right out of the gate, we had heard that he was somebody that was a priority for them that they wanted to keep. Jerron Tibbs was a priority on that first recruiting trip they went out on. They flew into Indianapolis and they met with him and, worked to retain him. So yeah, you get him back almost 600 yards receiving last year. And then you add a big bodied receiver in Joshua Manning. You get the speed guy in Brandon White, and then you got Isaiah Williams that we know they're really high on, and making a jump in his sophomore year here, the Texas A&M transfer. So, I look at the top 6 guys at wide receiver, John. You think about Adonis Moise making a jump after his true freshman year. You bring in a JUCO guy, Derek Sally Jr., that I wouldn't expect a ton from this year, but he's a big bodied guy, 6'4". You got a lot of size at receiver with Tibbs at 6'3", Manning at 6'2", Sally at 6'4". And And then you got Williams and Moise and Brandon White that kind of bring that speed element that are a little smaller.
Yeah, I mean, I got to admit, I'm still a little gun shy at receiver based on just what the track record has been with the position at K-State over the last, 10 years post Tyler Lockett. But Jerron Tibbs is like evidence to the contrary on that, where Tibbs was really solid. I think if you would have given me that stat line on Tibbs this year, 600 yards receiving, you'd take it and say, hey, that turned out pretty well. Shout out to Parker, PFF Parker on the Discord, who was the biggest champion of Jerron Tibbs this offseason. I will give him credit for being right there. Patreon.com/3moff if you want to join the party on Discord.
The other thing to keep in mind, I mean, they kept Garrett Oakley. He's got to improve the drops, but there's no question talent there. Willie Ancio back at tight end, and then Lincoln Cure. We knew from the moment Colin Klein was hired that Lincoln Cure would be back, and I'll be interested to see, John, how Colin Klein utilizes Lincoln Cure's skill set. And does he put him out wide some? Does he target him? When they put him on the field, he never really got targeted this last year. So we'll see what they do to scheme him up too. But they've got some size, some physicality at the position, some unique things that they can do with their scheme.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Like tight ends, K-State still seems to be pretty stocked with talent there. How that's going to come to fruition on the field, we shall see. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we're going to look at the overall, like where is this class ranked right now? What does that actually mean? There's a high-profile name from last year's team now going to Kansas. We'll cover all that when we come back here on 3 Law.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
All right, Cole. Your boy Dylan Edwards is headed to Kansas. He's going to be a Kansas Jayhawk. Visited for the basketball game against Baylor the other day. Announced on his Instagram recently that he's going there. Look, I think we all were pretty frustrated by what happened last year and got a bit tired of the Dylan Edwards saga by the time it was all said and done. I certainly don't begrudge K-State for anything that happened or went down. Colin Klein and the staff maybe not prioritizing him, trying to bring him back. Like, I don't fault anybody after what all that was and what the team had to deal with. I will say there is still there's got to be at least a piece of you that's like, I mean, there's a ton of talent there if things work out. Now, I don't know what the odds are of that actually happening, but I can understand why Kansas would buy low on this and see if there is something that they can still shake loose, some consistency that they can shake loose. I mean, he is definitely an explosive player. If you can do that, as evidenced by, I mean, like the one game that he really played, like a one full, I guess, quote unquote, healthy game this year was UCF, and he had over 100 yards and he was busting some big plays. So we'll see. I don't think the odds are incredibly high that it totally hits at Kansas, but that is at least something that'll be, it's going to add a little bit more fuel to the fire in the rivalry between these schools. Kind of like, what it sort of reminded me of was when Lance Leipold went and grabbed Sean Snyder for a year. What was that, 23? I think it was 23 because it was Sean Snyder's special teams that didn't have a good night in Lawrence when K-State won that game. But so, from a K-State perspective, you would hope it works out more like that, but we'll see.
Look, yeah, I mean, if you're Kansas, it makes sense to take a flyer on the talent and hope that you can fix him and get it to work and he can stay healthy. So, and it also kind of fit the narrative that they were trying to plan for this year in the recruiting class on the high school ranks when they were landing some of those in-state guys. Now, I know Dunnigan, they lost ultimately to Miami, but trying to sell that the state of Kansas and landing Kansas kids and emphasizing that, and they landed some of those guys in the state this last year. Then you get Dylan Edwards, who was a high-ranked recruit, highly thought of, Kansas native that transfers over. And if you can make it work, then yeah, you can talk Kansas State with that some. And it would be frustrating to watch that work out for Kansas after what K-State staff endured for the last couple of years. I think the betting odds on that working out well are relatively low. I mean, somebody's shown you who they are after quite some time. You've got a pretty good sample size of that. I would probably bet against that working out very well, but I think if you're Kansas, you got to take the shot. And so makes sense for them. We'll see what Dylan Edwards is able to do there. But and I don't know what his options really were. I mean, there were rumors that there was really only FCS schools sniffing around at one point, but then we also heard there were rumors of Georgia and Ole Miss, but that's, something that his camp has tried to float out before in the past, that schools like that are interested, when not sure they really all that much were. So who knows what to believe. But yeah, it'll add a little bit more juice to the rivalry if he's available for that game. KU's sideline is going to be right in front of the K-State students. And knowing what we know about Dylan Edwards, I'm not sure how he'll handle that.
So. Yeah, somewhere there's a John Kurtz that's going to channel the inner 2009 John Kurtz energy of being on the front row of the student section, yelling at Gerard Johnson that he was Diet Jamarcus Russell. And that was the day that K-State won like 100-5. So there you go, Harambe, a football score for you, 100-5, whatever the score was that game. What was the score of that Texas A&M game?
66-14, right? I think
something like that.
14.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, it worked.
The press box. Yeah.
It got in his head. Cole was up in the press box covering the thing, but I was doing yeoman's work down on the sideline, front row.
Yeah. Yeah. It was actually, I think, as I recall, it was 62-14, not 66. I think K-State lost to Texas Tech that like the prior week, 66-14, because it was that gigantic score swing. Yeah. Like, and we don't know. I think a lot of people were saying on social media, it's all like, oh, well, K-State plays KU the next to last game, so we'll see if he's even out there on the field. We actually don't know the Big 12 schedule yet, so we don't know when K-State would play KU this last year. Like, it was being treated like rivalry weekend at one point. Then this last year, it was right before Halloween. So it's been kind of all over the place. The jokes will write themselves if it's at the end of the year, obviously, but if it's earlier, we'll see. To see if Dylan Edwards is on the field for KU. He's their most talented running back that they've landed. He's different than the Syracuse running back they brought in the portal, who's more of a slower, big bruising running back that doesn't have that burst. So, yeah, if you're Lance Leipold, makes sense to do it. We were talking off air. It is of note, like, him and Chris Kleiman are pretty close, and, they would have talked, I would assume, about this. At the end of the day, Leipold has to make his own decision, but I wouldn't expect Chris Kleiman to say, yeah, that's, somebody you should definitely take based off experience, but Leipold's got to take that chance.
Is Highshaw back? Is he still there? Is the Iowa kid there? Are they both gone?
Nick, you'll have to remind us on that. Both gone.
Both gone. All right. That's why I was like, I can't tell you anything about the Kansas running back room other than Dylan Edwards right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as far as the totality of the K-State class goes, and we'll make this our top storyline, brought to you by our friends at Alenco. It's alencohome.com, ALENCO home.com, to get hooked up for all your home improvement needs with some great K-State people at Alenco. Rankings, it is so hard to know what to believe or what to see here, but just for your information, because I know people want to know this. According to On3, K-State's overall transfer class is ranked 69th in the country, but On3 does like a transfers in, transfers out. So they're valuing the amount of perceived talent that you're losing on the way out compared to what's coming in. Like, I don't know. It's one spot ahead of Iowa State, 2 spots below Utah, 3 spots below Michigan. I mean, so like, I don't know. Michigan seems to have some pretty high profile players in its transfer class. If you go to 24/7, it's much kinder. It's just talking about players in. It ranks K-State at 38. The one 4-star prospect there is Wendell Gregory, if you're curious about that, which, I mean, that's no surprise. That was a big-time national get. The K-State got the edge out of Oklahoma State. Look, overall, people have been asking me about this, and I'm like, there are a number of the individual pieces, like Wendell Gregory, honestly, what they did with the pass rush at the end. Elijah Hill, I think, is another big name that they got in there. I like a lot of things. I can make you a case for why this would be a really good class. But at the end of the day, you're talking about 26 new players and counting, perhaps, and a totally new coaching staff. totally new system. Like, I don't know. I mean, Cole, hopefully you have something a little bit more insightful to say than that. But I do think overall it's almost unfair to say a whole lot more than that, other than like, hey, if you trust Colin Klein and the staff, I think they would feel pretty good about what they did. But it's going to depend on a number of factors as to how exactly this is going to work out.
Yeah, it's hard to forecast right now. Now, I like a lot of what they did. And the way that I would look at it, John, is early on, and especially really throughout the entire portal window, they hit on a lot of their top targets. Like if you look at the guys that they brought in throughout the first couple of weekends, the majority of the guys that they brought in, they ended up landing. And so, and then they took a couple of big swings at D end and they hit. I mean, you and I and everybody were really concerned about the pass rush and where they sat at defensive end just 10 days ago. And then they go get 2 of the top 20 defensive ends in the entire portal. You know, Elijah Hill's ranked the 20th D end at one point as of last week in the portal, the freshman out of Kennesaw State. I mean, you go get a guy with 11.5 tackles for loss and 9 sacks as a true freshman, you know, from Kennesaw State, and a guy that Texas Tech came hard after. And look what Texas Tech just had to do with Jamon Mathis and getting him to flip from Virginia. Look, at the end of the day, K-State dodged a bullet there on the Jamon Mathis stuff with him going to Virginia. Yeah. K-State now gets what I would deem a much higher upside, more proven pass rusher in Elijah Hill from Kennesaw State. Look what he did as a true freshman this last year. And then you get Wendell Gregory, one of the best pass rushers in the entire portal. You hit it out of the park at defensive end. I feel great where they are there. Now, there are other spots where you're just going to have to rely on Colin Klein and Trey Scott and this coaching staff and their scouting and their analysis. They went into the portal window with basically like a 3 deep of targets at each position of what they wanted to attack. And they had backup plan after backup plan ready to go if they needed to go there and call an audible. And so they were really prepared. They'd looked at film of the guys that were on the team last year. If they didn't have proven film in game, they looked at their practice film. They evaluated that. And so they kind of had a sense of, okay, we think this guy can contribute for us next year as a redshirt freshman, et cetera. Like there's unknowns because they're relying on some guys leveling up in competition, guys that might have proved themselves at the group of 5 level that now have to prove that they'll carry over to the Big 12 level. There's also guys that redshirted or had minimal production at the Power 4 level, but they were high profile, had high pedigree recruits, have upside, but can they make that jump now that they get to Kansas State? Austin Ramsey. You look at defensive tackle, right? I mean, Austin Ramsey, Kamari Burns, guys that had under 200 snaps each this last year. De'Arian Hicks, Gardner Webb, defensive tackle transfer. Like that position could give you a little bit of anxiety because you lost Malcolm Alcorn Crowder to the portal to SMU. And then obviously you also lost Eli Leo and Uso Seumalo at D tackle. So you're going to rely on those guys to really be big contributors this next year. And they don't have a ton of proven production. That's where you got to rely on the scouting of Trey Scott, Colin Klein, and the coaching staff that they're going to be able to make a jump. Isaiah Williams, you know, Brandon White, how do they use his skill set? Wide receiver, et cetera. Some of these interior guys, Charlie Adams, how does he translate from Cal Poly to playing at this level on the offensive line for Kansas State? Love the addition of Tanner Morley, offensive guard transfer from Colorado State. Like I could go on and on. Overall,
linebacker, I feel like is another area where you're going to have to, you know, really rely on some guys stepping up.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the linebacker is an interesting position because they're going to run probably what looks like a 4-2-5. So you're going to have 2 linebackers on the field at all times. They brought in 2 linebackers in the portal with Jacoby Oliphant from Oklahoma State, who's got a lot of potential. And then Makai Mason, who was a big portal win coming out of Louisiana Tech, had 14.5 tackles for losses last year. He'll carry over and he'll play meaningful snaps. You return Gabe Powers, Rex Van Wy, Asa Newsome. They prioritized Asa Newsome in the portal. They flew up to Iowa to see Asa. They want to keep him, and they did. And then the other thing about linebacker that's interesting is Darian Whitaker was a huge priority. Redshirted last year as a true freshman, and he was somebody that this staff likes a lot, and he was somebody that Chris Kleiman and Joe Klanderman liked a lot, and Klanderman tried to take him to Baylor with him in case they was able to retain him. And there's other redshirt freshman linebackers, John, we heard about that they liked, the last staff really liked. Weston Polk, Sawyer Schilke, you know, and so those are guys. He's talking about the secondary, JoJo Scott, Sirius Stinyard, like guys that redshirted last year that were decent recruits coming out of high school, coaching staff liked. They might need to be guys that contribute for this team, and they're guys that are sticking around. There's a lot of those redshirt freshmen from last year, guys who redshirted that we didn't see play, or you only got on the field for a few special team snaps, that I think will be key contributors this next year.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I feel like retention-wise, it's so much easier to talk about the portal, the incoming players in the portal class. It's a lot sexier, right, to talk about that. But I think a lot of times retaining your own guys can be a bigger deal. Now, I know K-State fans might have a little bit of trauma associated with that just because that was one of the big talking points for last year's team, and that didn't wind up working out. But I look at, like, comparing like Texas Tech and BYU in the Big 12. Like, if you on 3 would have Texas Tech with the number 1 portal class in the country right now. And I mean, it's great, but like BYU has made some really nice savvy additions while maintaining basically its entire core of like all the stars of last year's team. I mean, I'm almost inclined to like that sort of thing better than having to mix and match all these pieces. All that to say, K-State did a better job in retention than I anticipated they probably would. I would have thought you would have had more of those guys that you just rattled off, specifically some of the younger guys that maybe haven't played as much yet. And I guess probably that's why you didn't see as much of that, because they don't have as much film out there for people to snatch up and have them be as hot of names. But I was impressed by what the staff did from a retention standpoint, to be completely honest, understanding that, like, we already did the show where, like, hey, you lost guys to Indiana and, SMU and all these frontline players. Jace Brown goes to LSU. Like, I get that. But from that standpoint, where things were at one point where it was looking like, all right, the dam's really breaking here, I thought they did a pretty good job of mitigating some of the damage. I guess I'll put it that way. Maybe that's the better way to phrase it.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like at one point, like, everybody was leaving, and that wasn't the way it was going to work out, but it was because you were in that period of time where there was a coaching change and the portal wasn't open, so all you could do was lose players. And so you just kept hearing negative headline after negative headline, and those guys ended up at really good programs, a lot of them. They probably lost 7 or 8 guys that the staff would have loved to have been able to keep, all things considered. I mean, I'm sure they would have loved to have kept Jace Brown. We know they wanted to keep Malcolm Alcorn Crowder. Austin Romaine, they would have loved to have kept, but it doesn't make sense to allocate some of the resources to a middle linebacker like Romaine and some of those other guys where they're getting paid an extreme amount that, at the end of the day, K-State staff's kind of operating off a salary cap where you allocate the most resources and trying to figure out, all right, here's where we can get a value add for a little bit lower cost, but this guy's got a skill set or traits or characteristics we think we can tap into that can be somebody that we can unlock, but we can get it more value, cheaper, etc. And then some of those redshirt freshmen, yeah, you're going to be able to pay them a lot less, keep them. I mean, most of that class is intact that K-State, the staff wanted to keep around. They didn't cut them. Like, we know they would have let guys go if they didn't think they could contribute, because they did that with a couple guys in the signing day class and a couple of the guys that redshirted last year. So they had tough conversations with guys. They looked at practice film. They relied on a couple of the coaches, I'm sure, that are back from last year's team on feedback and advice on what you think of this guy, et cetera. And they made some hard decisions there. So at the end of the day, I would, like, if I'm putting a letter grade on it, and keep in mind, they could, we think they're essentially done, and that's the indication that's been given to us. You could still see them maybe like best player available type. Somebody falls in their lap, take a swing. Maybe there's a D tackle out there where they get a break and they're like, all right, we'll take him. He's too good to pass up. We got a little extra income or money to throw out. So there could be another add on, but I would say B to B plus, John, if I'm putting a letter grade on it. It's hard to do though, again, because like I trust Colin Klein. I trust the staff and what they're doing. So that's where it's coming from. But I'd be lying. Like, you and I haven't sat there and broken down film of Isaiah Williams and all these different guys that they brought in. So some of it's a crapshoot. Who knows?
It is, because I think if you were like ranking the Big 12, I mean, I think it's pretty consensus. I mean, obviously, like, Texas Tech's a great class, but then outside of that, there's a lot of love for what Houston did and what Oklahoma State did. Oklahoma State had the advantage, obviously, of hiring Eric Morris from North Texas, and they brought, Drew Mestamaker, like a top 5 quarterback, Caleb Hawkins, top 5 running back. I forget the receiver's name, but they pulled a couple receivers, one of whom was a, top 5 caliber receiver in the portal. So they have a big time class coming in terms of the rankings. But outside of that, I just don't know. I mean, I think it totally probably depends on who you're asking, what specific things you're looking for, and how you would rank the rest of the actual Big 12 portal classes. BYU's is relatively small because they retain so many people, but I do like some of the things that they did, but If you want to say K-State is in competition for the best outside of that group, sure, fine. I don't know. This is the nature of portal classes. Still wildly different, I think, even than when you think of like 10 years ago, a prep recruiting class, a high school class.
Yeah. And look, ultimately, a large portion of it is just going to be dictated by the retention of Avery Johnson, and they held on to him, and can Colin Klein and this coaching staff tap into him to make him take that next step, help him take that next step in his career path. And I think they've surrounded him with enough weapons. You hope the offensive line is in good shape. I like a lot of the guys that they did add. I think I maybe if I was nitpicking on where I maybe would have liked to have seen just a little bit more, maybe a bigger swing at interior offensive line. Wesley King was a priority guy for him. He ends up at West Virginia. Maybe more of a more proven defensive tackle, wouldn't have minded seeing. But outside of that, I feel like they did a really nice job. And again, I think Kamari Burns from Cincinnati, John, is underrated. The D tackle from there, I think he is going to take a jump. Don't forget, he was playing behind Dante Corleone. And so his snap count was a little bit more limited, but he's playing behind one of the best defensive tackles in college football. So that I expect him to make a jump, and Austin Ramsey will see the Kentucky transfer, another year removed from moving from offensive line to defensive tackle. He's physical enough. He's strong enough. Can they refine him and tap into that? If so, he's got the size to play the nose.
Cole, you excited to talk teeny bit of hoops? You want to talk
a
little basketball?
I am ecstatic. Something about watching basketball games with a completely numb feeling. What a nice feeling that is. I
hang on.
Go to a break. All right.
Okay. I was going to say, don't make them wait through the break. Okay. We got to tease these people.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. We'll be back with some basketball in a moment.
Hey, what's happening, people? It is Benny Heiss, KCSN betting analyst. And while the Chiefs may not be in the playoffs, that doesn't mean there is not plenty of action to go around for the rest of you that are still crazy fans of the National Football League. And with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, it makes every playoff moment feel bigger. So whether you're looking at individual matchups in the wild card, or for a possible Super Bowl matchup, or for futures come postseason time, DraftKings has your back. And they also have your back with early exit protection. If the player in your eligible NFL prop goes down at any point in the first half, guess what? You can still get paid in cash. What an opportunity. What a way to be able to enjoy the playoffs and not worry about anybody that you include in those props going down, especially early on, and ruining the rest of all of your legs. So here's what you do. You download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, use the code KCSN, that is code KCSN, to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Remember, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. New York, call 8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, wager tax pass-through may apply in Illinois. You must be 21 plus in most states. Void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer.
Well, K-State's 0-5 in the Big 12. Latest loss at Oklahoma State. And Cole, I can certainly relate to your comment about feeling numb, because that is how I felt about it. I was watching the end of that game, and I was literally just like, I hope that they win, but I was not feeling like the pang of, like the nervous pang of like every possession, like what's going to happen here. At this point, I'm just like, this season seems like a lost cause. It felt like that even before the game in Stillwater. And it was overall, in a vacuum, that's a pretty decent effort. Like Oklahoma State's a pretty solid team this year. That was a road game, and K-State led for a good portion of the game. And you absolutely had an opportunity to win, but I just, at the end of the game, was like, and I tweeted this, I just felt like, man, okay, so a lot of questionable coaching decisions, and you give up 2 offensive rebounds with a 2-point lead, and with the third crack at it, then foul a 3-point shooter. That checks out. That was my only thought. Just like, that checks out. That seems like what this basketball program and team is right now. And the year of our Lord 2026. So if you would have told me that's how the game was going to end, I would have said, yeah. I mean, yeah, that does not shock me. Doesn't shock me at all.
I think you and I, all of us, were really just kind of sitting there waiting for something to go wrong. Like, gee, they were up to, how are they going to lose this? It wasn't like, and you've watched games with me that I care about, and some of our listeners probably have too. And like in a game like that, John, that I really would be invested in, I'd be up pacing around at the end of that game. Like,
yes, those who were at the Holiday Distillery watch party saw you literally like breaking chairs and knocking things over. Sorry, Holiday, by the way.
Yeah. So and knocking drinks out of my guy Colby's hand as well, and spilling it and making him clean. Just embarrassing. This situation, I never got up off the couch. I literally was sitting back, just watching, so relaxed, wondering what's going to go wrong. And they got the second offensive rebound. Now, yes, I think that was a bad whistle in terms of it. It wasn't a jump ball. It should have just been a timeout to K-State. But at the end of the day, get a clean rebound, and you had an opportunity to get a clean rebound on the time before, and you didn't do it. And this team's 239th in defensive rebounding rate, and they haven't been able to rebound the damn ball in the entire Jerome Tang era. It's never been fixed. That's what happens when you don't recruit a front court. So they don't get a rebound, back-to-back offensive boards, third chance, and, you foul a three-point shooter. A lot of questionable coaching. Jerome Tang, I don't know what he was doing. You and I were at the Nebraska game together, John. That entire last 6 or 7 minutes, Jerome Tang subbed offense for defense and took Abdi Bashir out of the game. Every chance he did. Why is Abdi Bashir in the game? I mean, I'm sorry. He's one of the worst power 6 defenders in college basketball. Everybody knows that about him. He is a shooter. Why is Abdi Bashir in the game in that situation guarding when you've gone offense for defense with him and gotten him out of the game throughout the season in situations like that? And he commits a blatant foul on a guy that's 83% free throw shooter that was going to have to shoot a contested guarded three from the corner. Just awful.
I was hoping, Cole, I was about to bring it up and say, I was going to hope that you had some kind of counter for me on that, because I saw it, and immediately before that happened, like on the possession as it started, I was like, why is Abdi Bashir in the game? Like, no offense to the guy, you got one job. It's to go snipe threes. It's not to play defense. And that's the whole struggle with that, is how much can you leave him out there? But he's a valuable offensive piece. But yeah, I don't know. And then it was a horrible foul. I mean, a horrible foul. Now I will admit, here's where I will show my rear end a little bit here, in that, like, I missed pretty much the entire first half of the game. Thank you to starting these games at 9:00 at night on Saturday, whatever. But was David Castillo like that atrociously bad that they felt like they couldn't put Dave Castillo in the game? Like, what is the logic here? I didn't know if I was missing something.
I don't know. He wasn't. I mean, Kamari McGriff had fouled out. That was the only. Taj Manning had 4 fouls. He was on the court. McGriff, by the way, is now fouled out in 3 different games that he played 14 minutes or less.
What is somebody, Cole, can you get me the stat of minutes played per personal fouls for Kamari McGriff this year? Like, I mean, it's unreal. And he, again, a guy that can be really valuable and productive on the offensive end, but he cannot stay on the floor or defend to save his life.
Yeah, I mean, he's 74% from the floor this year. He's a really good finisher. He's one of the best finishing bigs K-State's had in a long time around the rim. But yeah, I mean, he fouled out at Arizona in 9 minutes. He fouled out against Oklahoma State in 14 minutes. He fouled out against South Dakota or somebody at 14 minutes earlier this year. It's just constant. He's struggled defending. He's not been a very good rebounder. He's been tremendous offensively around the rim. So they didn't have him. The only thing I could think of, John, is they were thinking Abdi Bashir, 4 seconds left. He's 6'7". Like, that's the one asset he does have. So if he goes vertical and throws his hands up straight, he's going to be hard to shoot over the top of. But instead, he had his hands down, clamping down on basically the Oklahoma State guy's arms. The one thing you don't do in that situation, because a cerebral player is going to go up if he senses the hand down on the arm or reaching out over, like you see in the NBA all the time. And so, yeah, I don't have an explanation for it, John. I don't know why he was on the court. There were other reasons. They had opportunities multiple possessions before to go up by multiple scores, and they didn't.
PJ Haggerty just arm barring a guy. I mean, just basically punching a guy for an offensive foul. I was just like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cole, I don't know what a lot of alarming things that happened down the stretch from a coaching decision.
Well, yes. Okay. I've got another one. I wanted to make a point though, Cole, because you were hammering him for the rebounding, how it's just never been fixed. And I'm kind of two minds there. It's like, well, this team is what it is. They're not going to rebound. Like we know, I mean, they're just not, but you are correct. It's been a program wide problem. And I had this thought pop into my head. Do you remember what they put after the FAU game? Do you remember what they put on the back of the t-shirts the next year? They put the rebounding number from the FAU game, which was 44-22. They got out rebounded by 22. That was the emphasis, the driving emphasis for the offseason. That was 3 years ago. And that was the emphasis. And they haven't fixed it in 3 years when that was on the back of the t-shirt after the FAU game. I mean, that's what's so maddening about it.
John, you and I and DY interviewed Jerome Tang at Big 12 Media Days before he'd coached a game at Kansas State in 2022. And we asked him specifically, what do you want this team to be known for? And the one thing he said was rebounding. They've never rebounded in 4 years. And obviously that team was great at a lot of other things, so I'm not killing him for that. But he said that was the point of emphasis heading into the first year, was rebounding. I could pull the clip. I could go back and get it. It's never been fixed. They've made coaching changes on the assistant staff. They brought in different players. They've never been able to correct it. So it's
and then you've got guys like, I know what is I saw a little bit of Virginia the other. What is Ugana Onyenso's rebounding number this year? I mean, they bring in a guy like that who they just can't keep out there on the floor. And maybe I'm wrong and he's not doing that well. At a certain point, he certainly looked like he was rebounding the ball a lot better at Virginia than he was here.
He was at one point, and I watched Virginia the other night. I thought you were actually going a different direction because they have a Belgium big man, De Ridder, who K-State recruited hard and I think chose Virginia over K-State, and he's averaging 16 a game, John. Just another example of a European that worked out well, and K-State massively failed in Europe this year. Think of the resources.
Europe.
So,
yeah. The other coaching decision that we need to talk about is, okay, you give up the three, fine. Taj Manning actually makes a great play to catch the ball and be able to call a timeout while toe tapping the sideline. And you've got 2 full seconds to get a shot off, and it was clear that PJ Haggerty was just coached to get the ball and let it fly, as if there was half a second left instead of 2 seconds. And then in the post-game press conference, Jerome Tang said that it was, hey, we thought they might foul. Oklahoma State only had 4 fouls. They had fouls to give. So we thought they might foul. Then you have Steve Lutz after the game saying, well, if they would have been, he said basically if the inbound pass would have been coming from a different location, we might have, but we weren't going to there because of where they had the ball and being worried about the new continuation rule, which makes it even more dangerous to try and foul there. And that's what's it's God, set up for a shot, PJ. Take a dribble. Why do you got to coach fear so that the shot's got to go up automatically? That just feels like a moment Oklahoma State understands the risk. They're not going to do that there. And if they do, then you fling the ball up right away, just like what happened on the other end, and you've got a better chance of it because the way the rules are right now. That drove me insane too. You had an opportunity for a much better shot than what you actually got off there, which was an air ball.
Well, I mean, look at the last 2 back-to-back Saturday game situations, John. Down 3 at Arizona State, 4.3 seconds. The closest they could get was a half-court heave for PJ Haggerty. Guys can go court end to end in 4.3 seconds. K-State couldn't. They couldn't even get past half court. And then, yes, in this situation, I became concerned when I saw Jerome Tang talking to Haggerty, and they showed the camera huddle, John, and Haggerty was asking him something. I was like, did you see him showing grab down on the arm, hold? And I'm like, oh no, is he telling him he thinks they're going to foul? And when they put down, go up with the shot, when the arm's over you. And, I thought surely they're not thinking that because, yes, K-State's coaching staff should have known that Oklahoma State with 2.1 seconds cannot afford to risk fouling, even though they had fouls to give because of the continuation rules and because K-State has to get a shot up so quickly. It's too risky to foul in that situation. That's why you see coaches when they're up by 3, like once it gets under like 3 or 4 seconds, they don't typically commit the foul again because the risk is there that the shot could be going up with that little of time left and you could give them 3 free throws. And K-State, clearly the coaches draw up a play that not only, it's not even going to the basket. It's going away from the rim and just flinging a 28 footer that lands 5 foot short of the rim. And like, yes, I would like to see PJ Haggerty have a little bit more awareness that they're not even within like 3 feet of him when he flung that, to know as a veteran player not to take that shot because, hey, they aren't fouling, but it was coached into him. And like, you could see some of the reactions of K-State's players on the court. Like they were just kind of like, wait, what the hell was that? Like, I don't get it. Like, you had time to draw something up. What I would have done is I would have had PJ Haggerty coming off a screen at the top, or somebody, Nate Johnson, I don't care who, going toward the rim with momentum and trying to get a foul or score that way, not trying to get a foul on a 30-foot 3-pointer. I mean, that's
the thing, dude. PJ Haggerty's whole game is being the craftiest SOB out there, either at getting a runner off and making it, or drawing a foul. Like he's very good at that. He's quite skilled at that. That's it was a 1-point game, right? So you'd much rather take your chance doing that than PJ Haggerty launching a 3, you know? I mean, especially in the, 3 that deep. Yeah.
It defeated the whole purpose of the well-designed inbounds to get it past half court and the timeout. Like I truly don't understand what they were thinking. It's another red flag. It's another end of game situation. And John, as you were talking about the Abdi Bashir stuff in the corner, and him committing that foul. Look, this was matchup driven, and they didn't have a chance to get him off the court last year in this game because Coleman Hawkins drilled a 3, and I don't think K-State had a timeout. But remember the Drake game? Who's guarding Bennett Sturtz at the end of the game as he pulls up and drills a dagger game-winning 3? It's Brendan Hassan.
Oh, okay. Oh boy, Hassan was? I forgot about that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not trying to throw shade at Brendan Hassan, but like, he's your worst defender on the court guarding their best player, Bennett Sturtz, in that situation, and that's exactly who he pulled up in front of and drilled the game-winning 3 after K-State tied it. Like, it's just, again, late game situation. Now, you could point to other great late game situations where they won it. Like, think about the 22-23 team. I mean, Keontae, Marquise, those guys, they came up with some marvelous late game situations. The alley-oop dunk against KU out of a timeout.
They had one against Oklahoma State that year too.
Yeah, they had great out of timeout sets and late game sets that they made plays. And it's happened numerous times before, but like the last couple of years, alarming.
Well, yeah. So. It goes back, I mean, how many times did we get frustrated with like Tyler Perry just standing around and dribbling and then chucking up a contested 3? Although, honestly, I probably would have taken that over what you got at Oklahoma State. So, I don't know.
It's just, at the end of the day, it's really staggering to think about. It's you and I and all of our listeners have sat through some horrendous K-State basketball in our lives. To think that this is the worst start in league play since 1996-97.
Shout out to D. Scott Fritchen, man. Yeah, he tweeted out the first 0-5 Big 12 starts 96-97. He tweeted out the roster of that team, which, by the way, finished 4-12 in the Big 12. Mark Young was the leading scorer. Ayumi Paco May. Shout out to Paco May, dude. He was your second leading scorer. Sean Rhodes, Aaron Schwartzendruber, Gerald Aker, Manny Dies. Watch out, Collegian reporters. Marcus McCullough, Chris Griffin, Josh Reed, Dax Jones. Shout out to son of Dax Jones on the message board community. Miro Vasiljevic and Chris Marsh. That was the basketball team the last time K-State started 0-5 in conference play.
That's crazy to think about. Some of those Woolridge teams and other Asbury teams didn't even do that outside of that one. So, yeah, I mean, they're in a bad place, and we can give a bigger picture type thing later in the year when we see where they ultimately end up at. Bart Torvik projects them, John, to finish 13-18 overall and 4-14 in the Big 12. So I mean, think about the direction of the program. 26-10 in year one, 11-7 in the league, to 19-15 in year two, 8-10 in the league. Was it 8-10? Well, I knocked my microphone over and getting all frustrated by it. I have the exact 8-10 in the league in 23-24. 24-25, 16-17 overall, 9-11 in the Big 12, and now they're projected to go 13-18 and 4-14 in the Big 12. So 26-10 to 19-15 to 16-15 to 13-18 as a projection. I mean, that is a steady, just downward trend, and that's very alarming. And I've always said, like, you can't miss the NCAA tournament 3 straight years, but there's other nuances, obviously, where the coach has a far bigger buyout than money, and the money situation is hard.
That's going to be well, plenty of time to discuss what some of that looks like. And I guess, in total fairness to the team, I mean, give them a chance to turn it around, but it's going to be tough. This is a stretch. Oklahoma State is pretty good. I mean, that's not like an easy road game, but 2 of these losses have been 2 of the easier games on your schedule, with UCF at home and at Arizona State. You see Arizona State was down like 29-2 at Houston a couple days ago. I mean, I mean, they play Utah on Tuesday night by the time you're listening to this, and they that's going to be their best shot, honestly, at a win. Utah looked pretty good over the weekend, right?
They're getting better. I mean, they competed with BYU, then they beat TCU on Saturday, so they're improving. First-year head coach. I actually went through and I polled like all the winning, like since year 2 of Jerome Tang, and K-State's won 52% of their games. They're 44-41 overall. John, only Oklahoma State, West Virginia, and Arizona State are worse from a overall winning percentage. And Oklahoma State's at 51%. They fired Mike Boynton, and so they made a coaching change. West Virginia, 49%. They made a coaching change because they had the obviously interim situation with what happened with Huggins. And then Arizona State's at 45%. That's Hurley. They're probably going to make a coaching change too. I think his contract runs out at the end of the year. His buyout drops. I don't know, but he won't be back. I'd be surprised if he is. So, those 3 teams beneath you will have made a coaching change during that window. So.
Well, and the part that is, I guess there's 2 sides to this. I'll say, in respect and fairness to Jerome Tang, I think he had a lot to do with how much NIL money he's had to spend. He's gone out and beat the trail himself to generate that. So credit to him for that. Like, he definitely understood we said during football season, like I appreciated that part of his attitude. He was like, hey, I recognize what's happening at this moment in college athletics. I need to go get the money. He's done a lot of the fundraising himself. The flip side to that is, if you take those other teams that we're talking about there, and this obviously isn't just like widely publicized available information, but if you were doing an analysis on those teams that have been the worst in the league over the last 3 years and how much money has been spent per win by each of those teams, that's what would probably, I assume, make this look much more damning. I don't have in-depth knowledge of like West Virginia, Arizona State's NIL spend in basketball, but I am pretty confident that it is significantly less than what has been spent on K-State's rosters the last couple of years.
I think it's also fair to say, John, and that to that point, that K-State, with this year's roster alone, just lost 3 games over the last week where they've spent exponentially more than each of their opponents. UCF, Arizona State, Oklahoma State. I think Oklahoma State's starting to spend more, but I think there's no question K-State spent more on its roster than their last 3 opponents that they dropped all 3 games to. And like, you look at UCF, I told you K-State's 52% overall winning percentage over the last 2+ seasons since the 2023-24 year. UCF's won 59% of their games. It's quite a bit better than Kansas State. Colorado's won 58%. Now, they had the NCAA tournament, the Pac-12 year. They went.
I just saw it. There was the article that came out. Was it on? It was Field of 68, did the article where they asked Big 12 coaches what the best jobs were in the conference. Colorado got picked last, and there was a quote there from a coach that said Tad Boyle's truly a very good coach for what he's been able to accomplish with little to no resources or investment there. So to your point, yes.
Yeah. Utah's at 53%, 1% above K-State, and they fired Craig Smith. I mean, like, It's K-State 17-26 in the Big 12 since post Elite Eight season. So it's tough, man. That's Gene Taylor's going to have a hard decision at the end of the year. We'll see. Maybe they'll get it righted. I mean, they could go 2-0 this week, beat Utah, and they get up. Jerome Tang hasn't lost to Kansas and Bramlage yet. We'll see if they're up for that one.
Cole, as distraught as your face was on the TV cameras after the FAU loss, if you were to, at that point, have heard yourself just rattle off those stats of what was about to come after that game, what would your face have looked like on CBS's cameras?
I mean, first of all, probably even sadder because, I wouldn't have realized. I think we left there thinking we're going to have a lot of fun moments still over the next several years. And, yes, getting to a Final Four is really hard, but, we're going to have more opportunities. I think I would have felt even more crushed knowing, where this was headed. That was our one moment to get there. So, yeah, I went up to Vanessa before the Oklahoma State game. I shouldn't say this on air. I was going to say, no, it wasn't going inappropriate. I was going to say, I'm choosing you over, I'm choosing watching a show with you versus watching K-State basketball. And I said, and this was on Saturday night, I was like, I'll watch a show with you instead of K-State hoops if you want. And I was like, who would have thought I'd choose you over K-State basketball 3 years ago? When you look back on it. So
that's true love, folks. I don't know if that doesn't warm your heart. I'm not sure what will. We can't possibly get more romantic here on Threema than what just happened there.
Yeah. So I never would have saw this going down this road, and it sucks. We were all big Jerome Tang fans and thought that it was a home run. And I was one of the last ones to jump off the bandwagon, but I can't defend what's going on anymore.
Guys, I've never wanted a coach to succeed more at K-State. I mean, when I came into this world, Bill Snyder was already in the process of succeeding. So I feel like I can say that. I have never wanted a coach to succeed more at K-State. I was so bought in. Yeah, but what can you do, man? We not going to lie to you about what's happening on the court right now. So
yeah. Frank Martin would be really close for me, John, but
we know Cole.
Yeah. So, but yes, Jerome Tang's right there. But now Colin Klein jumps, and Colin Klein will be the guy that I will want to win at Kansas State more than anybody. So,
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Join us on the Discord. Still a good time for that. A lot of info. We got a lot of new people that have been there. It's great. Patreon.com/3mod to get signed up. Just $5 a month. You can get some bonus audio content. Cole's been doing great write-ups of all the transfers if you want some of that. We appreciate our good friends at Alinco. Thank you to Holiday Distillery, which brings you Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon and 360 Vodka. And, of course, we appreciate the efforts of Nick Springer behind the scenes as well. Thank you for listening to another edition of Threema. We will talk to you all very soon.